we're here to talk about Urban Legend. Thank you so much for
Yes,
taking time out of your weekend to have a chat.
my pleasure.
I mean, obviously, it's we're talking because it's been released through 88 Films, and they've done this big snazzy box set. They did it last year with I Know What You Did. Yeah, there we go. Still waiting for my coffee. They did it with I Know What You Did last year. So it's obviously something that they.
It was. I have a copy of that edition. They fortunately sent it out to me after it had sold out. I didn't get a copy in time, but they managed to get me one, and it's gorgeous too. They're a great company. I'm really fond of the guys over there. They've been really generous. They just sent me a whole bunch of discs. I got a pile of movies from behind the iPad right now, so I'm making my way through those too.
So what has that collaboration been like, working with them on, what was your first cinematic baby?
It was pretty much all via email. I mean, they asked me to contribute a piece for the booklet, and I did that. And they licensed all the extras I created for Scream Factory. So there's a great documentary that we made. I went back in 2018 and we saw all the cast and crew again, except for Jared and Josh. Couldn't track them down in time. I was only there for 2 weeks, but we managed to get pretty much everyone for that documentary. And it was wonderful, just seeing everyone again. And they all had such good memories of making the film, which was really nice after 20 years. So I'm really pleased 88 Films were able to license all that stuff. So, I said on Twitter, I think this is the definitive edition of the movie. It's the best encode of the movie since the original Sony disc came out. There was a few issues in the Scream Factory, tiny things that most people probably wouldn't notice, but I think this is a beautiful edition. So next time I watch the movie, I'll be reaching for that version.
And I mean, in a parallel universe, you could have also been involved in the I Know What You Did Last Summer box set as well. Can you talk through us about that?
Yeah, I got the script for that movie via my manager and I'd previously read the script for Scream, so I was kind of clued in a bit to Kevin Williamson before he kind of broke as this big name in horror. And I loved the script for I Know What You Did Last Summer, and I really wanted the job. And I thought, how can I convince these guys? I've only got a student film to show them what I could do. So I thought I'll go out and shoot a trailer for the script. I just went through and highlighted bits out of the script that I could shoot. I had about 10 minutes of 35mm short ends in the fridge in the company that I worked at that I was able to use. So I had to make sure I did everything in one take. And we shot this trailer, and I got it there, unfortunately, about 3 weeks too late. They already hired the director. And, I met Kevin, I met Neil Moritz, the producer, I met Robert Rodriguez, Deborah Hill, all these people with this trailer. And Neil said to me, you'll either direct a sequel or you'll do something else for me. And true to his word, a year later, he called up and offered me Urban Legend. So very glad that I used that 10 minutes of 35mm that way. It was destined for the bin, so I put it to much better use.
No, definitely. And I mean, you said Urban Legend then became your first feature film, and then you turn up and you're working with Chucky, you're working with Freddy, you're working with the little girl from Halloween 4 and 5. What was that experience like? Suddenly being thrown into the horror deep end.
I was pinching the writer and I were pinching ourselves every day, just trying to understand that this was actually happening. I mean, really every day it was so extraordinary for me that we were making a film. I'd gone from a couple of short things to all of a sudden being on the set of a feature. I'd never been on the set of a feature film before. Actually, I'd toured the set of Volcano once with Neil Moritz. That was the closest I came to being on the set of a movie. So the whole thing was kind of surreal for me. But after the first couple of days, that sort of wore off a little bit, the kind of the shock of the whole thing. And I just settled into the groove with making the film. I loved the cast and crew. We got along really well. They were incredibly supportive of me. All of them were. Jared, all the girls, Josh, they're all amazing. And I had a most wonderful crew that we handpicked. Like we picked, Charles Breen was our production designer. He'd built Harrison Ford's apartment in Blade Runner and things like that. So we were working with some really great people and people that the studio trusted. They wanted to surround me with as many good people as they could, obviously. I out of all those guys, I was the guy deeply entrenched in the genre, so I understood the genre really well. But the actual mechanics of making a film, a lot of it was, I was familiar with how it all worked, obviously, but I'd never done it on that scale before. So yeah, it was. I mean, it was just wonderful. We were doing rushes every morning before we went and shot for the day. We'd go to the lab, and next door in the other screening room was David Cronenberg doing exit stands. You know, I couldn't believe it. Alongside one of my childhood heroes, he was right there doing his film as well. No, it was wonderful. And, you know, I wanted Brad. He was the first guy that I thought of when I read the script. He just popped into my head as that character. So it was so wonderful to be able to get him to do that. And Danielle, I loved, obviously, from her work. She'd done a lot of action films as well as those horror films. I thought she was just terrific. I wanted her in the film. And yeah, I mean, Robert Englund came into, he was called into an audition. I said, "Oh, you don't have to audition for this role. I'll just give you the role. I've seen your work. I obviously know who you are." So yeah, I love that we were able to do that. The studio let me have a little bit of fun and kind of celebrate the genre a little bit like that, which was great. You know, I just thought it was really fun to be able to mix those kind of people with some genre baggage with a whole bunch of new faces, you know, that all went on to do great stuff. We picked a really good cast for that film.
Yeah, I mean, like, you know, Julian Richings, you know, your janitor, you know, he's gone on to be, you know, a quite well-established name in, you know, in the horror world. I mean, he played Death in Supernatural for a number of years, so you know, he's done all right.
He was wonderful. I love Julian. He was one of those guys we cast out of Toronto, and as soon as he auditioned, he was the guy who just had such a great look and such a great actor. And I remember when we finished the first cut of the movie, we were showing it to the head of the studio, Mike Medavoy, and he said to me, you know, when he bumps into Reese, right before she goes into Wexler's office and slips on the blood, he said, he should say boo. And it was a great idea. So we flew Julian all the way from Toronto to LA to say boo and then back on the plane. So it was quite surreal for Julian, I think, once he'd done his work for the day. It took all of 2 seconds.
I mean, I think one of the things that makes the film work so well is that, you know, we are all so familiar with the urban legends that are featured in the film. You know, were there any that you sort of grew up with that you found?
All of them. I'd heard all of them. That was my first reaction when I spoke to Neil and Phoenix. I said, "This is such a genius idea. Why hasn't anyone thought of doing this before?" It's such a. I mean, there's been films made like When a Stranger Calls is based on an urban legend, and Alligator is based on an urban legend, but no one's actually ever thought prior to Silvio of actually making a film set around those stories. I'd heard all of them. You know, The Dog in the Microwave, The Gang High Beam in the Show. All those stories came to Australia as well. So we call them urban myths in Australia. So, you know, they're all familiar to me, and you know, I just thought it was a genius idea, and we always said I pity the person who's got to make a film after this to do a sequel, because we've really used up all the good urban legends in this movie. I've got books and books on urban legends. There's lots of other ones, but they were the ones that everyone seemed to really know.
Yeah, and I mean, yeah, so, you know, you said that, you know, you heard them in Australia. Obviously, it was written in America. You know, as somebody in the UK, I was going, "Oh yeah, I've heard of that one. Yeah, I've heard of that." You know, what do you think it is about them that, you know, means that they are so universal? And I mean, like you say, you know, I think there's been a couple of, you know, Candyman sort of touched upon some urban legends and things, you know, but this was, you know, one of the first films that actually, you know, put them there on screen. I guess it's another way of distributing them. I guess before it was through word of mouth, but now we have this piece of fiction which can, you know, just another generation sits down and watches it, and suddenly these myths are alive again.
Yeah, that's it's interesting. They've always got usually a nasty ending. They often end in grisly death, but there's also just got to be just enough kind of element of truth to it. Like, really, you just believe just enough of it for them to become legends. You know, if you want to pass it on as a story, you know, most people think, you know, it happened to someone who knew someone. That's what makes them spread and what makes them live. So, yeah, I mean, there's great books by this guy, Jan Harold Brunvand. He writes books and books on urban legends, and it's quite fascinating to read about all the other ones too. I mean, it's just an interesting phenomenon, you know. I mean, but people have always told stories to each other, so, you know, these are just particularly catchy, memorable ones.
But the thing is, it's not just the deaths that are urban legends. You know, there's the people who are calling in to the radio show. You know, they've got sort of urban legends themselves about, you know, they're encountering. You know, there's even the bit at the end where you know, she's wearing the blue ribbon, which ties into another urban legend.
That's right. Yeah, we tried to sprinkle. We were celebrating that topic and that concept, so we really did try to work them in throughout the movie. Yeah, there's a lot of them in there, and even we had a frat party sequence. A lot of the, you don't notice it so much in the movie, but they're all dressed in, the characters are all like, there's the guy with the beehive where they had the spider eggs and all those kind of things in his hair. And we had a lot of that stuff going on too in the costume department. So yeah, we really did do a deep dive into the old Urban Legends book and try and get as many of them into the film as we could.
Yeah, and it definitely works. I mean, as well as directing, you're also a composer, which obviously means that, you know, music is a key part of your work. And I think,
yeah,
in addition to Christopher Young's score, you know, the choice of, you know, Jim Steinman's Total Eclipse of the Heart just works so perfect. It's just like an iconic opening for a modern horror film. You know, did you always know that that was a song you guys were going to go with, or did that come later on?
No, that was in the script. Silvio wrote that into the script. Yeah. Yeah, that was there in the very first read of the script. That was always going to be the song because it was turn around. You know, it was there for that whole moment there. So he wanted that. No, it worked out great, and that song sort of it was a really great way to open the movie, and endears you to that character too, because Natasha's she said in the documentary, she always sings off key. So she was like, they want me to sing off key, so it's a match made in heaven. But I loved working with Chris. He was. I would every night listen to his stuff on my headphones as I was going to sleep. All his scores, I had them all with me, big bag of stuff that I always wanted Chris to do the score. I mean, I love so many composers, but I just thought Chris would be perfect for this movie. And there was a score that he did for a film called Dream Lover that I was listening to a lot, and even taking it into when we were watching Rushes, playing some of his music against the scenes, and it just seemed to work so well. So I was delighted when I got Chris to do the picture.
Yeah, I see. Definitely, there is something about the score that sort of elevates it above some of the other films that were made around about that same time. And I guess it probably is having somebody with that pedigree. You know, he's worked on the Hellraiser films, and you know, he obviously knows, you know, he knows how to score horror moments.
Yeah, and it was an orchestral score. It wasn't a synthesized score. There's a little bit of synth in the score here and there, but it's very subtly used. I wanted it to be an orchestral score because I just thought it would give the film a bit more of a timeless quality. It doesn't tend to date so much if you use an orchestra, whereas electronic stuff can tend to give away the era that it was made in.
Definitely. And I mean, it's, you know, it's been what, over 20 years now since Urban Legend came out. You know, the horror landscape has changed in various ways. You know, how is it, you know, in your experience, you know, how do you find that it's moved on?
Oh, well, it went through different stages. I mean, obviously after 9/11, we had all the Saw movies and things where violence that was previously unimaginable that you could put on screen, like my movie Valentine was very tame in comparison to a Saw movie or something. But even Valentine was trimmed by the studio in that era. And then it all seemed to change after 9/11, and we got films that were really, really dark and really nasty. Then it kind of swung away from that into supernatural movies, which I really love, you know, and like James Wan's done some of the best examples of those pictures. And you know, now it tends to be it's swinging back again. It's you know, I hear there's a bit more slasher stuff happening in the wings. So horror is always evolving. It always has, really, and it's always gone through cycles. And every 20 years, it seems, you know, so the slasher thing comes back. I mean, I guess it was the start of the 80s when the first slasher wave started. It kind of started up again mid-90s with Scream, and who knows, it may be due for a comeback. You know, we'll see.
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously we had Halloween a couple of years ago. There's a new Halloween this year. You've got, you know, Scream 5, and then I think Colin Minihan's working on a new version of Urban Legend as well. So, you
That's
know,
right.
it's going to come back as well. So it's.
I know what you did last summer is getting put out for as a TV series, I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's some other stuff happening too. I might be involved in one of them as well.
I was going to say, because I mean, it's been a little while since you've done any directing. You know, are you hoping to get back into that at some point then?
I've got a couple of big projects that I'm working on at the moment. One's for television, and it involves a lot of other Australian filmmakers, which I'm really excited about. That's taken me a couple of years to put all that together, but we're getting really close to that now. And I'm about to go back and do a feature later this year in America. So it's good. Yeah, it's time for me to do it. I took a step back from it for personal reasons because my son was doing school. I didn't want to go back to America while he was in high school. Now he's in university. It's okay if I disappear for 6 months and the family don't see me for that long. So yeah, I've been focusing on music a lot lately, but yeah, I have been working on stuff in the background, and that's going to hopefully come to fruition this year.
I mean, it must be pretty cool for him, to say that his dad, has worked with, Robert Englund and all these other people and made these, these films that, his peers all sit down and watch. You can be like, yeah, well, my dad made that.
Yeah, his friends seem more impressed than he is. I think he grew up with it. He takes his dad for granted. Although the day that we went and visited Robert Englund for the interview, my son was over the moon to meet him. So that day he was impressed that his dad was a director.
I mean, obviously, you're, an Australian filmmaker who has worked in America. I know that a couple of your Australian peers have sort of said that, you kind of, for the work that you did, you helped, make it a reality that they too could come along, James and Lee with Saw,
Yeah.
They sort of looked at your films and like, okay, so there is a way that, all the way on the other side of the world, we can get over there. So that must be, quite nice to know that you, sort of help sort of forge this way.
I can't tell you how much pride I take in knowing that. James and Lee had a screening of Saw years ago back in Melbourne, and I went to that, and they saw me in the audience, and they basically said to everyone that it was my trailer that inspired them to go and do all that stuff. And Lee actually interviewed me when he was hosting a show in Melbourne years ago when I was promoting Urban Legend, and he chased me out to the car park and wanted to know all about what I'd done. And so, yeah, it's wonderful because since I did that film, a lot of other filmmakers from Melbourne and around Australia have had success in America in the horror genre. And I love that I was help pioneer a little bit of that stuff. I was just following in the footsteps of people like Richard Franklin, who went to my high school. We ended up going to film school with John Carpenter. He was the inspiration for me. I thought, God, Richard came from this high school when he gone and made Psycho 2. This was the year that I started in high school, and it was such a great thing to know that you could get there from here by and he was an example of that. And he came and watched my student film with me when I made my film Silent Number, which is on YouTube. He came and watched it with me at the graduation night. And that was one of the proudest nights of my life, sitting there with my hero, who gone and made some of my favorite films. So, yeah, I mean, that's what we got to do. We got to help each other and inspire each other and do what we can. Richard wrote me a letter to get me my first job, and people like Deborah Hill helped me get into the DGA and get my visa to get into America to direct the movie. That's the nice thing about the genre is a lot of people help each other, and there's a lot of good people. Dodgy people in the genre like Richard Stanley, they're the exception, not the rule, fortunately.
Yeah, there definitely does seem to be a more collaborative spirit than within some genres. I mean, you've got people like Barbara Crampton, who was obviously a big actor in the genre in the 80s. She's come back with You're Next, and she's always sort of seeking out new filmmakers and
Yes.
using her sort of star power to bump that film up a little bit. She's now moved into producing with Jacob's Wife, so there does seem to be this big sort of collaboration in the community, which I guess you don't necessarily see in other genres.
No.
They're all competing for the same audiences, and there's this big onus on taking money from to be the number one thing. And
I mean, you don't see conventions. You don't see. Yeah, well, I mean, fans and they love horror and science fiction. You don't see comedy conventions or action movie conventions. They just don't exist. But yet the horror fans are loyal, and I mean, I'm one of them. I grew up. I'm my inner 15-year-old still alive and well inside of me. I love all these movies just as much as all the fans do, and there's just something about that genre. It's a bit more collegiate, a bit more collaborative, and the people are nice. They're good in general. They're all pretty cool people. So. Yeah, it's definitely the nicest genre to work in. I wouldn't want to work in any other genre.
Yeah, I mean, sort of stepping away from Urban Legend, Valentine. I still remember going to the cinema to see Valentine. I was too young to see Urban Legend, but when Valentine came out, me and my friends were old enough, and
right.
I mean, it's friends from school that I don't see and don't talk to unless Valentine's on TV, and then one of us will message each other, because there was three of us, and one of us was a wimp, and she sat through the whole film covering her eyes, being like, I can't look, can I look yet? And me and my other friend found it hilarious that she was reacting like that. We even, when we left school, instead of doing yearbooks over here, we just did a notebook where we wrote each other's messages. And like Valentine was such a thing with me and my friends that she actually drew a an artistic interpretation of David Boreanaz with the bloody nose. So that's a nice thing. Whenever I sort of look back, it sort of reminds me of Valentine. And I guess sort of I'm not the only person that sort of has this sort of connection with this film and other films in the genre. What do you think it is about horror that does foster that sense of community? Because it's, it's that I don't necessarily remember who I saw,
Well,
drama.
we often go to these movies with our friends. I mean, I have the same thing. I've got great memories of certain movies that I saw with my buddies, and you just treasure those experiences. I think, that's one of the nice things about horror. It brings people together. They're good date movies. They're good movies to go see with your friends. In the case of Valentine too, I always saw Valentine just as much as a comedy as I did as a horror film. There's a lot of humor in Valentine, and I think that's one of the things people respond to about that movie too. Is it's like, it's funny. It doesn't take itself too seriously, and some of the best horror films, they can mix a little bit of humor in with that stuff, and I think audiences respond to that too. So I'm not quite sure why certain films have longevity over other ones, but I don't know. Maybe it's because sometimes the themes resonate a little bit more. Like, I think Valentine might be more relevant now than it was when it came out, because it was a very feminist movie, and it was really taking on toxic male masculinity and on the myriad of character flaws these guys had. I mean, there weren't too many good guys in Valentine. We were kind of roasting all of them. So that's kind of interesting. I mean, I'm really pleased that audiences still dig that film, but I really guess the answer to your question is probably just because it's a communal experience, and we have those great memories of seeing these movies with our friends, and because there are shocks and scares and stuff, they elicit certain reactions out of your friends, and like you just described. So no, I think it's cool. I'm really pleased to hear your story too.
Yeah. I mean, you mentioned that Valentine was seen as being quite feminist. Obviously, in Urban Legend, it's a female killer. Your climax of the film is 3 female characters, sort of working to.
That's right.
You've got Reese and Natalie sort of working together to take down Brenda. I guess it was sort of ahead of its time. Was there any sort of pushback from the studio with like the killer being a woman?
No, not at all. The studio were wonderful. I mean, they didn't push back on anything. I've never had an experience like that since. They were the most supportive studio I've ever worked for, and they trusted me, and they trusted the people that were working with me to do the movie. I had no interference from the studio on that film, which was great. My film Storm Warning is also a bit of a feminist movie. I don't know if you've seen that one, but that's very much a feminist film too. So I like to push those themes a little bit too. I think slasher films in general, the final, it's always usually a final girl, right? Yeah. So they inherently, I think a lot of them are feminist, even though there's murder and whatever going on. That was probably one of the genres that kind of pioneered that that idea more than anything else. So yeah, no, it's interesting how the slasher genre kind of works that way.
Yeah, but I think there is something extra special about Urban Legend with it being a female killer, and then it's Reese helping Natalie out rather than or particularly helping Natalie.
Yeah, the boy doesn't come to the rescue. Yeah, exactly.
So
and we definitely wanted it that way. It was always that way in the script, and Sylvia and I talked about that a lot. And Reese was such a popular character as well. She had to have her moment. We were building up to that moment, so we had to give that to her. And Natalie has to, she has to finally take the gun and shoot her friend and blow her out the window. And then we had fun with the ending. The ending was my idea, actually. We had a version of that in the script, but it was my idea to put Brenda in there and say, no, this is how the story really goes, because I thought that was a kind of fun way to end it. Setting up for a sequel that I wanted to do with Sylvia, where we bring back the entire original cast and tell the same story, but completely differently, with different characters playing different versions of themselves. The legends would be tweaked a bit. That was how we were going to do the sequel originally, but Phoenix decided to go in a different direction with that.
I mean, obviously, we mentioned earlier, Colin Minihan's working on something else. Are you you excited to see what he does with the?
Oh, I hope it's a massive hit. Of course I am. He's doing something around internet urban legends, I believe. So I don't know anything else other than that. I've spoken to Colin a little bit on email, and he's told me he wants to celebrate the first film, and I'm super excited that they're doing another one, and I just hope it's a big hit. So my old boss Mike Medavoy's producing it, and I want it to be a hit for him, because he's the man that gave me my career. You know, I owe him everything. So I only wish good things for him. He's a good man.
And well, that's it for my questions. So thank you for taking the time to chat with me.
Pleasure, Kat. No worries. You get back to your morning and your toddler.
I know, it's really weird. Like, I've done this now. It's like 7:30 here. And I've got like a whole Sunday ahead of me. You know, I've got like breakfast to make and stuff. It's very sad. We used to chatting to Canada and America all the time, but this is my first Australia. So
nice. Okay.
We managed to make everything sync up and work.
Groovy.
Yeah. But yeah, if I ever get in the storage cupboard, I'll find that picture that my friend did, because it does look quite a lot like David Boreanaz. I
want to see it.
Yeah,
Show
I'll
it to me.
I'll have to find it and tweet it onto you, because
groovy.
Yeah,
I love that.
We haven't really spoken in 20 years or so, but you know, if ever Valentine's on the TV or something, you know, one of us will like tag the other one in social media and be like, oh, look what's on, and we're instantly taken back to Friday. It was opening night in Nottingham Warner Village before it became a Cineworld. I still remember. I think it was even in like screen 10. I think I even remember the screen. It was, you know, one of those, you know.
Oh, I'm so glad that the film had an impact on you and you enjoyed so much, and it's something that bonds you and your friends together. That's really awesome. That makes me happy to hear that.
But yeah, so again, thank you for taking the time to chat with me. I'll let you get back to your weekend. And you think your box set turned up a couple of days ago, so I guess you still got plenty of stuff to
I got to work my way through it still. Yeah, there's a bit of stuff I got to watch still. Yeah, I'm going to listen to Mary Lambert's commentary is the next thing I'm going to do. So yeah, I
think mine's on its way tomorrow, I think, so that'll be
it's a good one. You like the documentary? It's really fun. It's actually, the documentary is worth having on its own. It's just really, it's like 2.5 hours plus there's extra interviews if you want to hear any more about the movie, if you're not completely sick of hearing about Urban Legend by that point.
Yeah, I mean, that is one of the I did spy the documentary, and that was one of the things that was sort of like, oh, like, so I've got the film on DVD and stuff, but you know, it was like, oh, you know, I'm always intrigued. I mean, there's a couple on Shudder about 80s films in Search of Darkness, and goes through basically every
they're great. Yeah,
every
really
horror film made in the 80s, and it's like 4 hours long, and I've been watching
they try and cover so much ground, and they end up just being able to devote like 30 seconds to every movie, so yeah. It's
but you know, I've been watching them quite recently, and there was one that showed at Sundance about folk horror, which was like 3 hours
I saw that was by Phil Escott, wasn't it? Didn't Phil do that one? No, he did the found footage one. He did the found footage one. Yeah.
But yeah, there's a folk horror one that was like 3 hours long, and talks about The Wicker Man and Midsummer and Witchfinder General and everything in between. They touched on a couple from Australia and Brazil and Africa, and
I want to see that. That sounds good.
Yeah, I definitely sort of seem to be in a horror documentary frame of mind at the moment. So I am.
Oh well, this is a 2.5 hour deep dive into Urban Legend. So yeah, I mean, there's no stone unturned in this documentary.
Cool. Well, I look forward to watching it, like I say, when my DVD on Blu-ray finally turns up. But yeah, best of luck with the release. I mean, I've seen a lot of people have already started receiving it, that have pre-ordered it. So it must.
Yeah, I think it's going to go well.
I mean, they
reckon it'll sell out. So I'm pleased for 88 Films. They deserve it. They worked really hard to make it really nice, and they're good guys.
Cool. Well, I will let you go, and I will hope to speak to you on the next one.